At the very top of the year, divorce is very common and it's on the mind for quite a few people. You have those who are considering it. You have those who have made the decision and now starting the divorce process. And you also have those who are divorced from a legal perspective, but they still feel stuck in their life. Okay. However, there's a shared goal that remains no matter where you are on your divorce journey. And that is your desire to live your best life. Okay, that is the shared goal that remains no matter where you are. I never met one person who didn't want to live their best life after divorce. That's probably one of the main things that people want. They want to be happy. They want to be able to have joy. They want to be able to see their life beyond this experience. However, what separates those who achieve their best life after divorce are those who cultivate a thriving mentality. Okay. That is what it is. Because when it comes to dissolving a marriage, you will have a survival phase when you're in a season of disruption. Okay. I just got to be honest about that. Because when it comes to the process of uncoupling, I always tell people there are layers to this. And I say this all the time. And that season of disruption looks different for everyone. It does, depending on your unique circumstances. That disruption can be a financial disruption, where you could be dealing with debt, dividing assets, or just adjusting to a new budget. And that can create some significant stress and a level of uncertainty, right? It can be the disruption of relocation. Okay. You may have to move out of the marital home and establish a new living arrangement. That disruption can be navigating a new co-parenting dynamic. All right. Co-parenting is not as black and white. All right. And being able to collaborate and communicate effectively with someone you used to be married to, that can take some time getting used to. And so there are things that you got to learn. There are things you got to implement to create that civil and supportive structure. Divorce can also look like a change in your kid's life. All right. New school, new home, navigating and adjusting life between both parental homes. Okay. It can also look like a person's safety being at risk. If you were in an abusive marriage, and again, abuse comes in many forms. It can come in the form of physical, financial, or even psychological. Leaving is not as straightforward as it may seem for some people. Not to mention that when divorce is presented as the decision to the other party involved, that can lead to threats, which can further complicate things. Disruption can also look like the emotional roller coaster of it all. One of the things that I always say is that although this may have been the best and safe decision for you, it doesn't dismiss the hurt you have. And I often hear people ask this question, well, why do I feel this way, Tanya, when I don't even want to be with them anymore? That's a legitimate question, but here's the thing. Not needing to be with them anymore, not wanting to be with them anymore doesn't necessarily take away the grief. That's not the trade-off. Okay. Disruption can also look like social changes. There may be some relationships that will shift. That's just the reality of going through a divorce. It could be the ex's family. It could be mutual friends that you all had together, to even couple friends. Like some people created friendships based on the foundation that they were married. It can also just look like your day to day. You know, adulting still continues. I tell people that all the time, even in the midst of uncoupling, right? So you got work, you got managing your home, taking care of the kids. And on top of that, you're navigating divorce. Okay. So with different parts of your life unfolding, it becomes hard to focus on anything else due to navigating all of those disruptions, because disruptions like this can hold a lot of mental and emotional weight where you find yourself overwhelmed and you're stressed out. And what this could do is that this could disrupt your ability to see the possibility of thriving on the other side. And what this also can easily do is that it can create a normalcy of just getting by or just getting through the day. And that's not a mentality that you can just live your best life from. It isn't. And so there's another disruption that has to take place. And that's the disruption from just getting by to now actively creating a life where you can truly thrive. Okay. And that transformation starts with cultivating a thriving mentality. Okay. So there has to be a mindset shift. And what this means is that a deliberate decision has to be made in your mind, as well as nurtured daily, to build a quality of life that reflects growth, fulfillment, and purpose across various areas of your life. Okay. And so what I wanted to do on today's episode is share with you my top 10 things that cultivates a mentality of thriving after divorce. Okay. And so this episode might be a little bit longer because I just could not narrow it down. I was like, these really are the top 10. I mean, I could have added more, but based on my personal as well as my professional coaching experience in women, I find that these are the top 10. Okay. And so the very first one, and there's really no particular order, but the first one that I wanted to point out that cultivates a thriving mentality is that those who want to thrive after divorce, they cultivate a mentality of deciding to be a victor and not a victim. That's the very first one. The first one is deciding to be a victor and not a victim. This particular point is a very powerful pivot. It is. And this is not as easy as it sounds, because when you've been in a marriage that may have been hurtful, that may have been harmful, there could have been years and decades of disrespect. You could feel like you was mistreated and done wrong and treated very poorly. There can be some resistance when you tell somebody that you need to be a victor over your life, okay? Because saying that can also send a message that your experience isn't valid. However, that's not what this point means, okay? Deciding to become a victor over your life is now making a choice to reclaim your seat at the table over your own life now. That's what it means. Because divorce can cause a person to feel real powerless. It can, where they feel like they have no autonomy due to the current circumstances and the breakdown of the marriage. It's almost like your identity has been stripped from you, which impacts your ability to choose better for yourself or even envisioning a thriving life beyond what's current, where you are in control. However, when you decide to be a victor, you're also deciding to restore that autonomy, where you do acknowledge the pain, but you're also not going to allow it to define you. That's the difference. You're not going to let this have so much authority that it dictates your decisions and direction and paralyzes you to the past. Becoming a victor over your life is now about stepping into taking ownership over your life now, because you can't necessarily step into your power being in a victim's mentality. That can only come from the mentality of being a victor, okay? And so that's one of the things that people do. When people want to cultivate a thriving mentality, they decide to be a victor over their life rather than a victim, all right? And so the second thing that people do to cultivate a thriving mentality after divorce, the second thing is that they become solution oriented, okay? That's the second thing. They become solution oriented. One of the things that I taught my kids at an early age, I taught them that whenever there's a problem, there's always a solution. That's something that I ingrained in them at a very young age. So even to this day, because they're 22 and 17 now, they'll talk to me about different stuff, whether it's work, school, friends, whatever, right? Things that's going on in their life. And when I find that something is like repetitive, like they just keep talking about it, I know that it's a problem for them, okay? And so one of the things that I will say is, whenever there's a problem, there's a what? And then there'll be like a solution. And the reason why that was so important to cultivate in them was because I never want them to be so focused and fixed on the problem, where they're giving it so much mental and emotional real estate, where there's absolutely no room to focus on possible solutions. I never wanted that for them. And what I've recognized in quite a few people, and this was me too, right? This is something that I've recognized when we keep seeing the same problem show up. Okay. The problem remained the problem, because sometimes we're just looking for everyone and everything to change it. However, if it's a problem in your life, then it's up to you to find a solution. I find that the problems remain the problems because maybe our perspective is very limited. And when your perspective is limited, it also limits your ability to be flexible and finding solutions, because the solutions that you need will always challenge you. They will. I find that the problems remain the problems because sometimes you'll rather hold on to the need to be right, okay? The need to be right can sometimes keep you stuck in the problem, where there's some ego that we have to break free from to see the problem for what it is and humble ourselves enough to be open to solutions that will challenge our perspectives. I also find that the problem remains the problem because sometimes we can be so laser focused on what we don't have what we can't do, and what's impossible for us, as opposed to seeing, well, what do I have? What can I do? What is possible for me at this present moment? Like, let's work with what we have and build from that. And when you want to cultivate a thriving mentality, you have to now look for solutions to your current problems. Okay. That's just the facts. All right. And so that's the second thing. The second thing that you must do to cultivate a thriving mentality is that you got to now be solution oriented. You have to understand that for every problem, there really is a solution. All right. And so the third thing that I find very common in those who thrive after divorce, they cultivate a mentality of being unbothered with what other people think of them, right? That's the third one. The third one is being unbothered with what other people think of them. You know, one of the things that I say is that with divorce, judgment tends to follow suit. It does. And I know it's easy to say, well, you shouldn't care what other people think. I know that's easy to say. However, it's actually natural to care about other people's opinions. So to all of a sudden turn the switch off of not caring what others think can be very unrealistic. But if I can be honest, I think we give too many people a seat at the table over our lives entirely too much. We do. We give them too much power. We give them too much authority. We give them too much control, and we give them entirely too much input about what we should or should not be doing. And when you want to cultivate a thriving mentality, you have to discern whose opinions you're listening to. You do. You have to consider the source, because if you think about it, some opinions that you're giving so much energy towards is coming from people who are projecting their own fears, their own hurt, their own unresolved issues and biases onto you. And you have to ask yourself this question: how far has that really taken me, right? How has that worked out for me so far? Because here's the thing, no matter what you do or don't do, there will always be those people who will always have an opinion. It's just what it is. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about them having an opinion. But what you do have the ability to do is determine how much energy, how much power, and how much influence you give their opinion over your life as well as your decisions. See, when you decide to let their opinion become a truth over who you are and what you should do, you have now surrendered the ability to define the narrative you want to create for your life, because you've given it up to others to determine your destiny going forward. And so the question is that what you want? Now, is this to say to not seek advice? Of course not. Because we all need a level of wise counsel. We do. However, much of the counsel that we're getting are also coming from people who aren't wise or even attempting to be wise in their own lives. Okay. And so I did a whole podcast episode on this. Podcast episode number 173, titled Letting Go of Others' Opinions, 6 Questions to Break Free and Live Your Life After Divorce. And I'm going to put that down in the show notes. Okay. And so that is the third thing. The third thing is being unbothered with what others think of you. Okay. And so the fourth thing that people do to cultivate a thriving mentality is that they do their inner work. That is the fourth thing. The fourth thing is that they do their inner work. All right. Now, here's the thing. The current thoughts that you're having, the same beliefs that you're carrying, the same emotions that keep resurfacing, the same behaviors that you continue to repeat, and the patterns that show up over and over again, to attempt to thrive in that space while not attempting to release what is holding you back will keep you in the same cycle. Okay. And many of us are in this endless loop. We're in this endless loop of limiting beliefs and unresolved emotions and unhealthy repetitive patterns. And it's happening year after year. And this particular point was very game changing for me in my own life. You know, one of the things that I share when it comes to my story of being stuck in my story for 5 years, it was because I didn't take the time to do my own inner work. That's what it was. I didn't take the time to do my own inner work. And to be honest, I didn't know that this was what that was back then, right? I didn't know that it was inner work. But here's what I did know. I did know that something needed to be changed. And that change was urgent. So there was a level of urgency right now because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I wasn't pleased with the outcome of certain things. And let me be clear. This wasn't about me not being a woman of action or lacking drive. I've always been an ambitious person. I've always been in a place of doing. However, I didn't know how to just be. I only knew how to do. I didn't know how to be still. I only knew how to push through. I didn't know how to be aware of what was going on within me. I only knew how to distract myself with busyness. I didn't know how to feel. I only knew how to suppress. And so because of that, my thoughts remain the same. My beliefs remain the same. My emotions remain unresolved, and my patterns and behaviors that didn't serve me continued. And because of that, it kept me in a state of running on autopilot where I was constantly doing, but never evolving. So I was trapped between who I was and who I wanted to become. And here's what's important to know. The version of you right now versus the version you desire to become doesn't just happen by chance. It doesn't. You have to be willing to do the inner work that allows you to release what no longer serves you, to realign with what matters to you, and to also rebuild yourself from the inside out. And so when you want to cultivate a thriving mentality, you must redirect your focus on what's happening externally to what's going on internally, because true transformation really does start within. And when you begin to prioritize that, the external changes you desire will naturally align. Okay. And so that's the fourth thing that people do. When people thrive after divorce, when they achieve their best life, they do their inner work. And so I did a whole podcast episode on this one. And this was like a couple of years ago. It was podcast number 107, titled, "What Does Doing the Inner Work Mean?" Because many of us don't understand what it means. And we need to understand what things mean so that we can actually now take the journey. All right. And so the fifth thing that people do to thrive after divorce, the type of mindset that they cultivate, is they cultivate the mindset of understanding that their ex is a non-factor. Okay. That's number 5. Number 5 is that they understand that their ex is a non-factor. All right. What I encourage anyone to do when they're going through a divorce, right? One of the biggest things that I encourage people to do, and you hear it about it all the time on the podcast, and that is to not minimize how you feel about it. You never do that, because when you minimize how you feel, you downplay your pain, and you don't give yourself the unapologetic permission to get through what took place. And when it comes to your ex and the things that occurred within the relationship, it is necessary as well as healthy to talk about it with the intent of detaching. Okay. And so what this means is that we're not going to give someone that we're no longer with so much mental and emotional space in our heads as well as in our hearts that is prohibiting you to thrive. That's what it means. Because let me tell you something. Let me tell y'all this. When you give someone so much mental and emotional space in your life, it robs you of your now. It robs you of your current. It disrupts your present, where you're unable to focus on the actions and the decisions that will move you forward. And when you desire to thrive, you have to be mindful on where you're allocating your energy and time. And so when your energy and time is always focused and fixed on what they did, what they didn't do, what they should have done, what they could have done, what they're doing now, who they're with, how they act, and what they say, and that's always the conversation, whether that's in your head to yourself or to whoever will listen and entertain what you're saying, then you have to take a moment and reflect on the consequences that doing this has on your present. Right? You got to ask yourself, like, what is this really costing me right now? What exchange is being made by giving this amount of time and energy on my ex? How does this interfere with my ability to be fully present in my own life? How does this disrupt me from pursuing my purpose, my peace, and my personal growth? Because here's the thing. I've witnessed quite a few people who are no longer with that person, but that person still remains so relevant in their life. And being relevant in someone's life doesn't mean that they're physically present in it, right? Like, they can be physically removed. However, their mental and emotional presence still remains. And it remains by being so anchored to the past that it drains your energy, it clouds your clarity, and it keeps you stuck in cycles that no longer serve you. It remains by having the same conversations about this person and what happened with no strategy or plan for healing. It remains by still feeling controlled by their words, their actions, and their decisions, even in their absence of no longer being physically in your life. It also remains by allowing unresolved hurt to dictate your present and future. And so my point is that as long as you keep this narrative around your ex alive in your head and in your heart with no intent on detaching, the less space you have on yourself and the life that you truly desire to create. Because here's the truth. You've already given them enough time. You have. You've given them enough time. You've given them enough energy. You've given them enough mental space, and their time is up. Okay, because you're not going to do that anymore. It's time for you now to reclaim your power, to refocus your energy, and redirect your attention from what was toward what's possible for you now. Because the more you invest in your own healing and your own growth, the less power the past has over you. Okay, and so that's the fifth thing that I find. I find that when people want to thrive after divorce, they cultivate a mentality of understanding that their ex is a non-factor. And I did a whole podcast episode on this one too. Podcast episode number 142 titled, Your Ex is a Non-Factor to Your Healing. All right.
When it comes to dissolving a relationship, there are many layers to navigate. The financial responsibility shift, creating an effective co-parenting plan with the other parent to mitigate or even reduce conflict, adjusting to new living arrangements, navigating legal matters, or what about your emotional healing and personal well-being afterwards, to even establishing a new normal for yourself and even your family, to even planning for your next chapter and rediscovering your identity. And with each layer comes with the weight of making decisions. And here's the thing. You don't want to just make any decisions. You want your decisions to be deliberate, okay? And why does this matter? It matters because every decision that you make shapes how you design your next chapter going forward. And one of the things that I realized is that when you're faced with countless decisions to make, it can create overwhelm, confusion, stagnation, to even making a decision that wasn't even given much thought, only to regret that decision later. And here's what I want you to do really quickly. I want you to take a deep breath, close your eyes, and ask yourself this question. What are two main areas in my life where I can use some guidance and an effective strategy so that I can thrive in those areas? And how will my life transform once I address those areas? And so over the next couple of months, I will be offering my one-on-one 90-minute strategy intensive for those who are ready to take the next step. And this is where you and I will work together on two major areas, and you will leave this intensive with a solid plan that will help you reach your goals. Now, slots are limited, okay? And so if you know that this is perfect for you to start getting unstuck and to start making some deliberate decisions for your next chapter, then head over to my website at tanyacarter.com/strategy, okay? That's tanyacarter.com/strategy, and I will put the link down in the show notes.
The sixth thing that people do is that they are able to be graceful and compassionate to themselves. That's the sixth thing. The sixth thing is that they are able to be graceful and compassionate to themselves. What I find a lot is that we can be real hard on ourselves, like extremely hard, where we overlook the need to be genuinely kind to us, you know? And when you're navigating divorce and stepping into a new chapter, there are going to be moments and times where you will be frustrated and overwhelmed. There will be moments and times where you will judge and blame yourself. You'll find yourself replaying the past and wondering what you could have done differently. It's going to be times where you feel like you've disappointed your kids and question if you're this unfit parent. There may be moments where you question your worth and your enoughness. There will also be moments where you doubt whether your efforts to improve are even making a difference. There are also going to be moments where you react and relapse in ways that may bring feelings of guilt. Other times you may feel like you failed, wondering if you'll ever get this thing called life right. You may even go through moments where you feel like no one gets it and truly understands what you're going through. And you also may feel like you're alone in it all. And in those moments, what you don't want to do is that you don't want what is a temporary moment right now and make it become this permanent state on how you function. Because here's what's important to know. Your mind will play tricks on you. It will. Where you will have thoughts that are disguised as truths, okay? Your emotions will fluctuate, which is why you cannot put your sole trust in how you feel at any given moment. And you will make mistakes along the way. There's no such thing as perfection. And because of that, you must choose grace over guilt, progress over perfection, and self-compassion over self-criticism. And that's impossible to do when you're unable to extend grace and compassion over yourself. Because here's the thing, grace is not something that you earn. And see, this is why a lot of us struggle with giving ourselves grace, because we think we're supposed to earn it, right? You don't earn grace through effort. Grace is not an achievement. Grace is a free gift, okay? Meaning that it is an undeserved gift, not something that you work for. It's available to you. However, in order to embrace what's freely given to you, that comes from making a conscious decision to accept it. It comes from making a conscious decision to release what doesn't serve you in those moments. It comes from making a conscious decision to extend it to yourself daily, okay? Because you're going to need it on a daily basis, all right? And it also comes from making a conscious decision to choose to move forward. Because here's the thing, what's done is done. You can't change what's been written. However, what's important to ask yourself is, what can I do from this moment forward? And so grace isn't about ignoring mistakes. It's about acknowledging them without letting them define you, okay? And so I did a whole podcast episode on that, all right? Podcast episode number 1, the skill of self-forgiveness, and 4 things you must do to start, all right? And so that's the 6th thing. The 6th thing is that people who choose to thrive after divorce, they make a decision to be graceful and compassionate to themselves, okay? The 7th thing that people do to cultivate a thriving mentality after divorce is that they realize that divorce is only an experience that they went through and not who they are, okay? That's the 7th one. The 7th one is they realize that divorce is only an experience that they went through and not who they are. What tends to happen a lot is that we can easily attach our identity and our sense of self, of who and whose we are, based on our titles and roles. I see that a lot. So in other words, whatever title that you have associated with yourself, that can also easily determine how you see and perceive who you are. So for instance, if you're married, you may feel like you've achieved this level of worthiness that you just didn't have previously, because that's what the world and culture likes to tell you, okay? However, if you're divorced, you may begin to now question your value. You may find yourself doubting your enoughness. You may now feel like your worthiness has declined because there's this belief that being married validates your value, because the title of being married now has shifted, and so has your sense of self. And when you do something like that, when you make that be the exchange, that's a very dangerous exchange to make, because in that exchange, what you're implying is that divorce equates to failure. It equates to unworthiness. It equates to being less than. So instead of you moving on who and whose you are at your core, you move on a title or relationship status, mistaking that for your identity. So in other words, you let the label of being divorced overshadow your core identity. You begin to define yourself by what happened rather than by who you are beyond this experience. You find yourself unconsciously connecting your worth to the absence of this relationship. And what happens is, when you make being divorced the entire book of your life, rather than just a chapter, you limit the story that you are capable of writing moving forward. And so it's important to know that your worth was never defined by your marriage, and it's certainly not diminished by your divorce. And so what you don't want to do is that you don't want to take this experience that you went through and now stamp it as your core identity. Because here's the thing, your story isn't over. You're not done. There are new chapters to write. There are new experiences to have. There are new possibilities to embrace. But if you stop writing here, then you rob yourself of that opportunity, okay? So it's important to make a clear distinction that divorce is not who I am. Divorce is just an experience that I went through, okay? And so that's the 7th thing. The 7th thing is that people who want to cultivate a thriving mentality, they recognize that divorce is only an experience that they went through and not who they are, all right? And so number 8, the 8th thing that people do to cultivate a thriving mentality is that they let people in. That's what they do. They let people in. One of the things that I said earlier is that the mind will play tricks on you. Remember I said that? I said the mind will play tricks on you. And when it comes to navigating divorce, the mind really wants to trick you into believing that nobody understands what you're going through. It wants to trick you into believing that you have to do this alone because no one cares. It can trick you into thinking that everyone is out to get you and no one can be trusted. It can trick you into thinking that you have to figure it all out on your own because asking for help will make you look weak. It can also trick you into thinking that all you're doing is being judged. So it's better to keep everything to yourself. And so what happens is you isolate yourself, right? You isolate yourself, and that becomes your protective mechanism to avoid vulnerability. Thinking that if I keep everything inside, then nobody can use my vulnerability against me. That protective mechanism is used to shield yourself from any judgment or criticism, even if no one is actually judging you. That protective mechanism is used to maintain this false sense of control, believing that handling everything alone is the only way to prove your strength. It can also prevent you from facing those uncomfortable and unpleasant emotions. So you find yourself keeping busy instead of allowing yourself to really process and heal. It also serves as a protective mechanism to avoid being hurt again, right? Because you have to think, when you've been hurt, the mind wants to trick you into believing that isolation is the safest option. So you convince yourself that keeping people at a distance will protect you from disappointment. You build these emotional walls up so high that even those who genuinely care about you can't even reach you. They can't even touch you. You withdraw to avoid the risk of betrayal or abandonment, even at the cost of your own ability to move forward. But here's the thing. Isolation may feel like protection, but it actually prevents you from thriving. Now, here's the truth. Everyone doesn't need to be let. That's not what this is about. So this is not about granting access to anyone. However, thriving does not take place in total isolation. It doesn't. One of the things that I highly encourage my clients to do when they're on their journey of thriving is to be strategic about who they're allowing into their space. That's huge because thriving is an intentional act. It is. And part of that intentionality are the relationships that you have in your life. So your community matters. I have a group coaching program. I do one-on-one coaching as well, but I also have a group coaching program. But I'm going to tell you something. One of the key elements that makes that group coaching program as successful as it has been is because of the community. It's because of the ladies that's in there. Yes, I give the framework, I give the tools, I give the guidance, I give all of that, but it's the community that makes it thrive. Because in community, you feel supported, you feel understood. In community, you realize that you are not alone in this journey. And in community, your ability to thrive compounds faster because you're now surrounded by people who genuinely want to see you win. And so while you may have this narrative in your head that's telling you that people don't care, why not form another narrative that tells you that there are people who do care? When you have that narrative in your head that help isn't available, then why not shift your perspective to see that help is available to you and you don't have to do this alone? If that narrative is telling you that everyone will hurt you and everyone is out to get you, then why not challenge that belief and recognize that not everybody has bad intentions and there are people who genuinely want to support and see you thrive. Because here's the thing, the stories you tell yourself shape your reality. So why not choose a narrative that empowers you instead of one that isolates you, right? And so that's number 8. Number 8 is letting people in, okay? And so the 9th thing that I find that people do to cultivate a thriving mentality after divorce is that they do the hard things, okay? That's number 9. Number 9 is that they do the hard things. I literally just had a conversation with one of my friends over this weekend. We literally just had this conversation. She's navigating some things in her life right now. And one of the things that I told her is that you are going to have to choose your hard. You're going to have to choose your hard because here's the thing. When it comes to thriving, it also comes with being uncomfortable. It does. So in other words, you are going to be challenged in ways that's going to disrupt your current programming as well as your current patterns. And that's going to be hard. It is. And what I find is that this is where it gets real. Okay, this is where it gets real, okay? Because when the rubber meets the road to do the things that will shake and shift you, you now have to make a choice to choose which hard you're willing to do. Because here's the truth. Growth is hard, but you want to know what else is hard? Staying the same. However, only one of them leads to thriving. So for instance, if you've always been a person who never set boundaries in their life, but now wants to and needs to, then you now have to choose the hard of speaking up for yourself even when it feels uncomfortable. If you've always avoided difficult conversations, then you now have to choose the hard of expressing your needs clearly instead of assuming people should just know. If you've always relied upon external validation to validate your worth, then you now have to choose the hard of knowing that you are enough regardless of who acknowledges it. If you've always placed other people's needs above your own, then you now have to choose the hard of prioritizing yourself without the guilt. If you've always avoided asking for help, you now have to choose the hard of reaching out and allowing yourself to be supported by other people. If you've always suppressed your feelings, then you now have to choose the hard of allowing yourself to feel. If you've always feared being alone, then you now have to choose the hard of learning how to be comfortable in your own presence and enjoying your own company. If you've always held on to resentment, bitterness, regret, or anger, then you now have to choose the hard of releasing it so you can establish peace. If you've always avoided making decisions out of fear of making the wrong one, then you now have to choose the hard of trusting yourself and taking action despite the uncertainty. If you've always avoided getting close to someone out of fear of being hurt, then you now have to choose the hard of opening up and allowing yourself to trust. And so the question is this: which hard are you going to choose? Is it the hard that challenges you to grow and to stretch and become this best version of yourself? Or is it the hard that keeps you stuck of repeating the same patterns, avoiding discomfort, and settling for less than what you're worth? Because either way, you're choosing something difficult, but only one of them leads to the life that you desire to create. So choose your hard wisely. And so that is number 9. Number 9 is that you have to do the hard things. You're going to have to do the things that's going to challenge you out of your comfort zone. All right. And so the last and final thing that I'm going to say today that people do to cultivate a thriving mentality is that they are consistent. That's the last one. The last one is consistency. Giving things time to work doesn't necessarily sound or feel as exciting for the majority of us. It doesn't, because let's just be real. As humans, it is natural to want things to happen immediately. That's just the truth. I mean, I'm like that, right? And I also think giving things time is more of a lost art in today's climate. I really do feel that way because we have the ability to get a level of instant gratification. We do. We have the access to getting quick answers, right? And where we can go on Google or go on YouTube. And we've become so conditioned to now expect this form of speed in all areas of our life, right? We have the ability to see highlight reels online where it shows the finished outcome or the finished result, but not the process that it took to get there. We swipe, we scroll, and we just move on. And what happens is when you are in that cycle of swipe, scroll, and move on, it decreases patience. And the idea of steady growth feels real frustrating. And we also have the ability to now quit when things don't necessarily happen fast enough, okay? It's like we've been conditioned to believe that if something isn't happening on our expected timeline, then it must not be working at all. And when it comes to thriving, here's the thing. Thriving is built over time and not overnight, right? And so what this means is that every choice and every action compounds over time. So thriving is a long game. I tell people this, it's a long game. I mean, if you want to be honest, I'm still thriving. It's a journey, right? It's a destination. I've been doing this for 10 years. So close to, well, it'll be 10 years in March. So I've been on this journey for a decade and I'm still thriving. So thriving is a long game. It's really a lifestyle, and what you do daily determines what you experience long term, okay? It also means that your desire for transformation must be greater than your reliance on motivation. It does, because here's the thing, the journey to thriving is not always motivating. I tell people this all the time. It's not. It's going to be times and it's going to be seasons where you're just not as motivated. And so, and because of that, it's important to know that motivation is really temporary, right? It may be the thing that gets you started, but thriving is built through consistency. It's built through discipline. And it's also built from a level of commitment. Okay. It also means that growth is not always visible in the moment. All right. So what this means is that thriving demands you to really trust the process, even when the progress feels slow or even invisible at the moment. So just because you don't see it just yet, it doesn't mean that it's not working. Okay. You got to trust that what you're doing is going to work. All right. It also means that your small intentional steps matter. Okay. It means that your small intentional steps matter. You know, one of the things that I really emphasize in my coaching is for people to pay attention to the steps that they're taking on a daily basis. Those small steps, they create huge results. And if you minimize that, if you overlook all of that, then you're missing out on the journey that's leading to the transformation. So here's my question to you for this point. If you've been consistent in doing what has not worked for you, then why not take a chance on being consistent with something different, something that actually moves you forward? Because if you've already seen where your old ways have led you, then what do you have to lose right now? Okay. And I want to close that point out with that question because I really want you to think about that. Okay. And so here's the thing. I want to challenge you to think of all the 10 things that I just listed, right? I can give you more, but these were my top 10. And I want you to identify, what are you doing right now? I just want you to step back and say, out of the 10, what am I really actively doing? What have I started to implement in my life? Because sometimes we could just be going and we don't stop and think like what we are doing. Because if you are doing those things, you want to acknowledge that you want to give yourself, you want to celebrate yourself, celebrate those wins that you're doing. Now, if you feel like you haven't started any of these, if you like, Coach Tanya, I ain't done not one of these things, let me tell you something. Or let me ask you this. Which one can you start doing today? This is not to say to do all 10. This is to do what you absolutely can. Okay, what can I do right now? What is that one thing that I can do right now? All right. And so these are the top 10 things that I want to share with you all. I know that for most people, that New Year energy is gone, but for me, it's not. Okay. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to make this year be a better year. And in order to do that, we got to shift the mind. We got to evolve in the mindset. And I know a lot of people want to skip that, but I'm telling you, this right here is the actual game changer. This is what I've seen in my clients that have allowed them to thrive. Okay. And so please make sure that you are following me on my social media handles. My Instagram is I am Tanya Carter. My Facebook and YouTube is Tanya Carter. I will put everything down in the show notes. And also please make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast so that you can receive notifications on when the next podcast will drop. And also leave a review. If you know that this podcast has been very influential on your journey of growth and development after divorce, then please head over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts to leave me a review. And last but definitely not least, share this information. If you know somebody who is going through a divorce or is divorced or is contemplating divorce, wherever they are on that journey, and you know that this is something that they need, then do them a favor and send this over to them so that it may be a blessing for them. Okay. So thank you all again for tuning in with me this week. You all have a wonderful and an amazing week, and I will see you next time. Take care.